Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for API, SP, and ILSAC GF-6A and GF-6B oils, what you need to know, an informative webinar presented by the American Petroleum Institute. I'm Shannon Brandyberry, Special Projects Editor with Motor Age and Aftermarket Business World, and I'll be your moderator today. Joining me today to share with you all that you need to know about the new API, SP, and ILSAC GF-6A and GF-6B gasoline engine oil performance standards, whether you're a technician, an owner, or a distributor, is Jeff Harmening, Manager for EOLCS, DEF, and MOM for the American Petroleum Institute. Jeff has been with the American Petroleum Institute for nearly 10 years and currently manages the Engine Oil Licensing Certification System, EOLCS, the Diesel Exhaust Fluid Certification Program, DEF, and the Motor Oil Matters Program, MOM. He also oversees the Aftermarket Audit Program, AMAP, which purchases and tests thousands of DEF and engine oil samples globally to ensure conformance with required specifications. Jeff, thank you for your time for this webinar.
Thanks, Shannon. I really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of it.
As the performance and efficiency of modern engines has increased, they require specialized motor oil that is carefully developed by engineers and chemists. With these advancements came a request from automakers to develop more robust engine oils that would be capable of meeting the needs of current and future gasoline engines. New motor oil standards went into effect on May 1st, 2020 to meet the demands of sophisticated high-performance engines. Jeff, why did the automakers ask for these new engine oil standards?
There have been a lot of changes to engines over the last 10 years since the previous engine oil category, gasoline engine oil categories came out. And so there's been a lot of advancements in engine technology. Most cars, SUVs, and pickup trucks now offer really high performance engines that are very much more efficient, and many of them require lower viscosity motor oils. Because of that, specialized motor oils were needed and needed to be carefully developed by engineers so that we could meet the needs of those vehicle manufacturers. So the new modern engines, most of these were gasoline direct injected engines and turbocharged direct injected engines, and they had their own issues with the previous category of engine oil. So some new tests had to be developed to account for those occurrences, and this was really the chief reason that the industry asked API to develop a new category.
OEMs must be explicit about viscosity grade for their applications. With that in mind, what are the specifics of each standard?
With regards to ILSAC GF-6A and GF-6B, these are the latest in the lines of the Independent Lubricant Specification Advisory Committee standards. So the ILSAC, as it's much easier to call them, obviously, is made up of American and Japanese automakers. And the ILSAC GF-6A specification is intended to be the replacement for ILSAC GF-5 going forward. That means it's backwards compatible to all applications where GF-5 oils were previously recommended. And you'll find that in the marketplace, these oils are limited to viscosity grades of 0W20, 0W30, 5W20, 5W30, and 10W30. These are the oils that can meet the stringent fuel economy requirements for GF-6A. When you get to other viscosity grades, it's much more difficult to meet the fuel economy requirements, and therefore you won't find those licensed as ILSAC GF-6A. With respect to GF-6B, this was a new category that was developed and really represents a split in the ILSAC specification. GF-6B oils are backwards compatible where 0W16 oils meeting API-SN performance were required. And it's really important to remember that ILSAC GF-6B can only be applied to 0W16 oils out there. And as you can see, we've got a new certification mark there on the left, which we'll talk about later, I'm sure. It's known as the Shield, and it only can be applied to 0W16 oils licensed against the ILSAC GF-6B standard. It's important to note also that this standard is a little different from GF-6A in that it has a different fuel economy test to account for those low viscosity oils. The third standard, and the one that that is part of API's repertoire, is API-SP. This standard will replace API-SN. It was launched at the same time as ILSAC GF-6A and B, and it not only is the umbrella standard that includes the new ILSAC specifications, but it covers all the other engine oil viscosity grades that we haven't talked about in previous slides. So for the viscosity grades of 10W40, 5W40, and the list goes on, those oils, because they can't meet the stringent fuel economy requirements, can still meet all of the other stringent requirements built into the API-SP specification. So you'll start to see SP oils in the marketplace going forward.
Jeff, it sounds like there was a lot of collaboration on the new standards. What was the process involved in this?
It took a great deal of time, and there was a lot of effort in the background that went behind it. With the new standard, you must develop new and replacement engine tests to account for new technologies. So there were 7 new tests developed, and there's an awful lot of collaboration between the automakers and the additive companies in that process. And then at that time, the oil marketers enter the process as the API lubricants group to, once the tests are complete and have been validated, to work on the specification and adopt it as part of a new category for API licensing. So all 3 of these groups, the OEMs, the additive companies, and the lubricant marketers, in addition to the API itself, work together to deliver a new category. As I said, there were new engine tests developed, and each test had a great deal of testing behind it to ensure that it was fit for purpose. These tests are uniquely designed to create extreme conditions so that new oils are robust enough to perform across every engine and also the trend towards extended auto drains. So these oils are tougher, they last longer, they perform better, and they ensure that the engines will work properly in any application. The new engine tests are updated versions of older ones. We've tested for oxidation and deposits before, for wear, for sludge and varnish, and fuel economy, but now the limits have been tightly tuned down, and we are providing better results for each of those types of tests. The new tests that we had to develop were to deal with low-speed pre-ignition, also called LSPI, and then also there's been a chain wear test introduced for the first time.
Could you tell me a little bit about what the engine tests are that are required?
Sure, and there are, as I said, there are 7. They go by the name of sequences. The first one that was developed is an older test that has been given a reboot, so to speak, but this is the sequence 3H. This is an oxidation and deposit test that is performed on a Fiat Chrysler 3.6 liter PFI port fuel injected engine. We also developed a wear test known as the sequence 4B, which takes place on a 1.5 liter PFI engine from Toyota. And if you're following along on the slides, you'll see an example of that test stand there. We've also included the sequence 5H test, which is a test for sludge and varnish. This is run on a Ford 4.6 liter PFI engine. Then we get to the fuel economy tests that are very important to the ILSAC specification, the sequence 6E and the 6F. The 6E is for the ILSAC GF-6A specification and for the API-SP category, while the 6F sequence 6F test is for the ILSAC GF-6B specification. These are more stringent fuel economy tests that are run on a GM 3.6 liter PFI engine. We also have the sequence 8 test, which hasn't changed much, but this is an anti-corrosion test. In addition to that, we have the 2 new tests, the sequence 9, which is the test for low speed pre-ignition, and the sequence 10, which is the chain wear test shown here on the slide. Both of these tests are run on a Ford 2.0 liter EcoBoost gasoline direct engine. In addition to all the engine tests, there are many bench tests that go into the specification as well that I haven't shown here. And so there is a full lineup of tests around viscosity grade testing in accordance with J300 and many other specifications built in around the elemental properties, the volatility of the engine oils. And I'll have a slide later on that will show some of the tests that we run in our aftermarket audit program that shows that there's plenty of bench testing behind it as well.
Then with all of this being the groundwork, what are the benefits of these new standards for the automotive market?
For those of you who may not know what LSPI is, low-speed pre-ignition is a phenomenon that occurs in gasoline direct turbocharged engines. And essentially what's going on there is that there is a premature ignition of the main fuel charge. And at that time, you may exhibit in your engine high pressure spikes, loud knocking noises, and sometimes catastrophic engine damage. So again, going back to the need statement, this was something that needed to be corrected and needed to be improved in the new engine oil specs. So we're happy, we were happy that that test was brought in with the new standard. The timing chain wear test is also very new and was deemed by the industry as a new type of testing that was very important for the performance of engines in general. In addition to all of that, because of the fine tuning of engines over the last 10 years and the continuation of fine tuning of engines going forward, more stringent engine oil performance requirements were needed for gasoline engines. And that is the explanation behind the need to update the other 5 tests to make them more strict, to make the testing more complete. And these will result in new performance standards that meet the needs of everyday people who, well, at least at one point, used to go back and forth to work every day.
So what do those within the aftermarket supply chain need to know about the availability of oils meeting the new standards? This includes WDs, jobbers, and shops.
Yeah, this is a great question, and it might be the most important question. You know, this is the first time in gasoline engine oils where the industry is experiencing a split category, so to speak. And if you recall, a few years ago, we had a couple of new diesel engine oil categories out there. So right now, for the jobbers and for the shops and the fleet suppliers, everybody is dealing with a larger menu of oils that they need to supply for the myriad of customers that they work with. So that's the first and foremost, that's the biggest challenge. Vehicle manufacturers also have to be now very specific for which viscosity grades they want to specify for their vehicles. So in the example of the 0W16 oils, which we're not seeing quite a bit as much in North America at this time, but are certainly very prevalent over in Japan and will eventually take a much larger foothold here in the States. These OEMs are going to have to be very specific in what vis grades they include in their OEM manuals, in their recommendations, and therefore the shops and folks that are working on these vehicles are going to have to be strictly in tune to what engine oils apply to each of those applications. So all 3 of these standards are now being licensed under API's program since May 1st, 2020. That means people have decisions to make in order to determine what oils they need to be carrying locally in order to continue to meet the needs of their customers. And it's also very important with the introduction of a new symbol to make sure that technicians and consumers alike are aware of what these symbols mean and the importance behind them. Just to give you an idea, since we started licensing back in May 1st, we already have over 1,700 licensed GF-6A oils. That means that there are over 1,700 oils out there that are licensed to use the API Starburst, and there are over 60 GF-6B oils licensed that will be out there displaying the shield in the marketplace. For API SP, there's over 2,300 oils licensed to date. I just checked this morning. And so obviously consumers are going to have their own important decisions to make, especially do-it-yourself folks. So these oils are now making their way into the supply chain, and everybody that you've outlined are going to have to make decisions.
Jeff, what steps do these shops need to take to ensure they have the right motor oils?
Well, first and foremost, shops and technicians really need to know how to manage the new oils in their facilities. It's highly recommended that the transition plan be created in the shop that takes into account the potential need for increased storage and identify those lubricants so that there's no confusion when choosing which oil to put in a customer's vehicle. Part of that also would be estimating the amount of volumes of each of those oils that you'll require, especially if you serve all sorts of vehicles. For example, it'll be important to determine how many vehicles do you normally serve in a week that would require 0W16 oils, for instance, because you will need to make sure that you have that GF-6B oil available. And then also part of that transition is updating all the marks on the tanks and the storage and the tools and the menus to make sure that everything is up to date. The good news is that with backwards compatibility of the new categories to the old categories, some of these may not be problems at all. You know, as I said before, GF-6A is backwards compatible to GF-5, GF-6B is compatible to the previous 0W16SN oils, and then for just the plain old API-SN oils, you can now use API-SP because of the backwards compatibility there. So you really need to think about what the transition plan is for the shop to find out if you're going to replace the older oils, if you're going to stick with the, if you're going to get the newer oils and stick with those. And then it also comes down to who your supplier is. You need to make sure that they have availability of the products that you think you'll need serving your customers going forward, because these oils are in the marketplace, and the vehicles that are going to be calling specifically for those oils are going to be coming in the next couple of model years at a heavy rate. So they'll be seeing more and more of them every day. Finally, it's really important to identify a clear date that you want to get the oils into the shop and start communicating that information to the staff and your customers.
Well, some tax owners and others likely know and understand the markings on their oil, but others might not. How can they tell the difference between GF-6A and GF-6B?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we've talked about this a little bit already, but I really want to reiterate this too, because oils that are licensed by API against these standards each have a different mark that they might display. And I would be willing to tell you that there's a lot of people that have confusion around these in the past, and that confusion is likely to continue going forward. So oils that are licensed to meet the ILSAC GF-6A standard are going to carry what the API certification mark, which we also call the Starburst. And these oils, it's important to remember, are backwards compatible and may be used on oils that require GF-5. If I flip through my owner's manual on my vehicle currently, and I own an older vehicle, it recommends oils for GF-5 and recommends oils that carry the API Starburst. So for these, going forward, I'm going to be looking for the new GF-6A oils that carry the Starburst, because I know that they're developed and will continue to maintain the performance that the older oils need. Now, when it comes to GF-6B, folks have to get used to the new the new API certification mark that we're calling the Shield. And in this case, it's a very specific trademark. It does spell out the viscosity grade on it. You should not encounter any shields that have other viscosity grades like 5W16 or 5W20. This mark is solely intended for 0W16 oils that meet GF-6B performance. And the reason that we wanted to get, that we needed to develop a new trademark was that ILSAC was really concerned with these low vis oils, that they don't want to get those into their older vehicles. And so they asked us to develop a new trademark. And so we believe that this new trademark is really going to go a long way to prevent misapplication and ensure that it's used where recommended, so long as everybody educates everybody up and down the chain and to the consumers to know what they're supposed to be looking for.
Why is there also then a need for API-SP?
Well, as I said a little bit before, API really is the overarching standard that will able to be applied to some of the other viscosity grades. It's going to continue to ensure that the engine components and the emission control systems, the turbochargers, all work optimally for those older engines, in addition to the newer engines. And the new oils will continue to help vehicles meet the fuel economy requirements, which is really a big driver in the whole need for a new category anyhow. And it's going to continue to protect engines with the ethanol fuels for up to E85, as the previous API-SN category did as well. And additionally, we needed to make sure that those more stringent tests and limits were available for the other viscosity grades, and continue to be good for consumers, their vehicles, and work on the environment and improving overall sustainability of engine oils. So API-SP really encompasses all of that and includes the ILSAC standards as well.
Jeff, do you have any best practices that shops could implement for storing, handling, and dispensing the new oils?
Yeah, there are a lot, and everybody chooses to do things their own way. So, some of the recommendations is obviously if you're going to put the right oil in a customer's engine, be sure you know what oil is required for that engine. And I know most of this is automated online systems, but if you're uncertain, it's very important to check with the engine manufacturer. As we get into these new oils, it's really important that those 0W16s don't end up in engines that required 5W30 because you won't get optimal performance. Low viscosity oils may not even make it to all parts of the engine that need to be lubricated during normal operation. So the first and foremost, most important thing is to know what's required for the customer's vehicle. The other thing is getting bulk tanks updated. Replacing the GF5 oil with the GF-6A it's kind of a simple transition because of the backwards compatibility factor, but it's also important. You may still need to carry GF5 oil in drums or in smaller containers if you have to keep some on hand for those consumers that only want the older oils, the GF5 oils. And I guess this is a good time to sort of talk about what you're going to see in the marketplace. GF5 is not going to be obsolete until May 1st of 2021. So for a transitional period of a year, you're going to see the starburst on GF5 oils and GF-6A oils alike. After May 1st, 2021, API licensed marketers are no longer going to be able to use the starburst on those GF5 oils. So at that point in time, we would expect that GF-6A will fully replace the availability of GF5 in the marketplace. And then you won't need to carry those additional GF5 drums later on. When it comes to inventory, obviously it's important to know what your volumes of oil are now, so that you know what the volumes of the new oils that you're going to need to order will be later. So that's something that's probably a no-brainer for most. Changing all of the identification symbols around the shop is going to be very important so that the technicians are able to make sure that they're pulling oil from the right container, from the right nozzle, and also, so that they know what to look for if they've got those consumers that are really sold on adding oil from a bottle and not from a bulk tank. All the dispensing equipment is, of course, going to need to be properly labeled so that there's no chance of misapplication there. And then one thing that a lot of people don't really think of are the receipts, but consumers really do deserve to be told what's being put into their vehicles. And in a lot of cases, it's a state law with the weights and measures folks that you report at a minimum the viscosity grade, this API service category, and identify the brand name of the oil that you've been putting into the vehicle. So there's some work there too that may need to be done in order to update your receipts to include that information. Finally, education is the big piece. Technicians need to be made aware of the changes to the oil category so that they can do their jobs better, but then they also need to answer questions that the consumers always ask as they're in there getting their oil changed.
All right, well, we've covered a lot of information about GF6 and API SP. Let's now talk some about API. For those who still might be wondering, what is the history and the role of API in the automotive industry?
Sure, well, to start with the history of the automotive industry, I'll start with the history of API in general. API really is a nonprofit organization, national trade organization that represents all facets of the natural gas and oil industry. We support 10.3 million US jobs and nearly 8% of the economy. We have more than 600 members in API, member companies in API, that is everything from the big integrated companies all the way down to the refiners, the marketers, marine businesses, services and supply firms. And we've been doing this for a long time. This is our 101st year. We started in 1919, and essentially we were born out of a need to, after World War I, when all of our countries were collaborating together to win the war, we realized everybody's using different fittings, everybody's doing things a different way. So really, we started out as a standard-setting organization, and to date, we've got more than 700 standards developed to enhance operational environmental safety, efficiency, sustainability, and some of that is obviously translated to the automotive lubricant industry. When it comes to getting involved in standards that deal with the automotive industry, API manages all of the necessary committees that are responsible for setting our globally recognized diesel and gasoline engine oil standards. And these committees also provide input on another program that API is involved with, which is our diesel exhaust fluid licensing standard. Because we're involved with these committees, we're working with the marketers, we're working with the OEMs, we're working with the additive companies. When we have a finished standard, the licensed marketers and locations that meet relevant standards used to register API trademarks on their products and marketing materials get involved in the process. And then API also operates monitoring and enforcement programs to ensure the integrity of our marks going forward.
What is the value of API standards in general, and also why are they needed?
Well, as you can see from all the work done to develop these standards, vehicle manufacturers, oil marketers, additive companies, and others work together to solve problems and create better oil standards that benefit the entire industry and overall benefit the environment as well. So in this process, OEMs will jointly chair panels with the lubricant marketers, or the oil companies, and together they are charged with developing these standards. And this is where the development of the engine oil quality tests are taking place. And this is all done through a consensus process. So it's not just the OEM saying, we need this and it has to be this way. They have to know what the additive companies and the oil marketers are capable of providing them through what their available technologies are. Once we get to that point, OEMs then start to recommend API licensed oil in their owner's manuals to their customers. And this is very common. I challenge anybody to take a look at their owner's manual and not see either the API Starburst or the API Donut in their manuals. So the oil marketers, in turn, are going to then license their products against the API standards themselves, and then API chips in by monitoring the quality of those products in the field so that we can ensure level playing field for all and ensure that high-quality products are out there to meet the needs of the consumers. Now, in exchange for all of these organizations participating in the standards development process, API has a lot of responsibilities too. First of all, developing a standard requires lots and lots of meetings, face-to-face. It used to be face-to-face, but we're still continuing with those meetings today. But API does fund those standards meetings. And along with some other organizations, we also fund the precision and interchange testing behind these oils, which essentially is to say this allows base oil interchange and viscosity grade read across to take place. You can imagine these engine tests are very long. Some of them are in excess of 200 hours. They use specific fuels. They involve tearing down the engine and inspecting parts and rebuilding it. So there's parts to consider. These things are very expensive. So one way that the industry sort of gets around all of the various viscosity grades that can be combined with these performance levels is to do significant amount of testing to see if you can interchange the base oils and then also read across the various viscosity grades to reduce the amount of testing that you need to do. And so we do fund that testing, and we also license the engine oils, and then, as we're doing today, promote API licensed oils in the marketplace in as many formats in any way that we can. And then what we do also is we test oils annually through the aftermarket, and I'm talking about thousands of samples, so that we can ensure that the oils out there that are using the API marks meet the specifications, and then also, since we're out scanning the aftermarket anyhow, we're looking for folks that may have never licensed their oils with API that are using the trademarks so that we can defend the integrity of our trademarks as well.
Can you tell me a little bit about the engine oil licensing and certification system and Motor Oil Matters?
Sure. Engine oil licensing and certification system is EOLCS, and it has been around for over 70 years, setting API oil standards. We've been in the business of licensing engine oils against those standards for over 35 years, and we've been testing those engine oils for 35 years. To give you an idea of what the program really is, it's a voluntary licensing and certification program that authorizes engine oil marketers that meet specific requirements to use the API engine oil quality marks on it. So that program defines, certifies, and monitors engine oil performance. The performance requirements, of course, as we talked about all day, are established by vehicle and engine manufacturers, in addition with some technical societies and trade associations and additive companies. And then the program really is designed to license the use of those marks on the oils and then educate folks to the need to be able to identify and look for those oils when they're making purchasing decisions. As I said before, it's backed by a monitoring and enforcement program to ensure that the licensees adhere to program requirements. And so this really is our aftermarket audit program. To give you an idea of what we're doing there, we are randomly sampling engine oils. We have a myriad of collectors through some vendors that we contract with around the globe that are out there buying packaged oil products off the shelves at your local big box stores, and then also running into your local quick lubes and sampling engine oils for us so that we can have those oils tested at a different laboratory and retested if necessary. And this includes running physical, chemical, and performance tests on the licensed engine oils and verifying that people are using the marks properly too. We don't want to have the marks being used improperly and conveying the wrong information out there to consumers. So we check all of these things. And then we will issue our findings from these oils to the marketers in our online licensing database. And if there are issues with the oil or issues with the packaging, we work with those marketers in a response loop until API is completely satisfied that whatever issue may have caused the problem has been resolved. And that will include reviewing all of their internal corrective action reports, working with them in a myriad of other ways to correct whatever the issue happens to be. We also, through the aftermarket audit program, find folks out there using trademarks or marks that are very similar to the API trademarks that are intended to deceive consumers into believing that they're API licensed. So we purchase and test those oils and get them out of the stream of commerce if required. Ultimately, if they're using our marks, and a lot of times there are companies out there that think because they work with another oil company that they have a license. API licenses aren't transferable, so sometimes the outcome is good. We work with those marketers to get them to join up with the program, and other times we have to take it to another level to make sure that those marks get off labels, that the products are out of the marketplace, recalls, customer notifications. So that's a very important aspect of the audit program as well. As I mentioned before, we do an awful lot of testing on these oils. We've got a slide up right now that shows all of the tests that we run on both PCMO, which is passenger car motor oils, or gasoline motor oils, and heavy duty engine oils, which on this chart is HDEO. But we're running tests on viscosity at 100. We're doing high temperature shear tests. The list goes on. And we run these, many of these tests we run on every oil, while some of the tests we run at different intervals. But you can see these are some of the properties I referred to earlier that are also part of the specification. So we're testing these oils against the limits in the ILSAC and API-SP specifications. The Motor Oil Matters program is a completely different program. This program is designed to get the installer locations and the distributor locations involved in the licensing process. So the overall outcome here would result in an oil that's licensed from the time of manufacture, that the distributors that are transporting these oils into the marketplace are licensed as long as they meet our API 1525A chain of custody, and then also that the installers themselves are reporting to consumers what they are receiving. And so that's also taken care of in 1525A. So Motor Oil Matters really is a program that gets the remaining part of the chain involved in ensuring that there's high quality motor oils available. So to be a part of the Motor Oil Matters program, especially if you're an installer or a distributor that wants to get involved, it's very simple. You just go to motoroilmatters.org, There's an online application where you're asked to identify the bulk oils that you carry or dispense at your location, that you commit to dispensing oils that meet the API performance standards, and then permit API to come in periodically and sample and test those oils. In return for joining the program, licensees will be ensured that they're compliant with over 32 states and the District of Columbia's weights and measures programs. Remember, I said before that these programs require that company and brand name, or company or brand name, viscosity grade, and the oil performance standard that's being claimed on the packaging appear on the invoices and the service receipts. In addition to that, you're giving your customers validation that oil quality matters to you. You're providing yourself with some differentiation perhaps in your local marketplace, and you will have access to the MOM trust mark shown here on the left-hand side that we issue to our licensees to proudly display in their stores, in their window, on the doors, what have you. And then by doing this, we're ensuring protection to the quality of engine oil because of the strict chain of custody that must be followed throughout. So it really is a win-win for everybody, including, most importantly, the consumer. And just to give you a quick look at what states we are aware of that have this, what we call Handbook 130. This is NIST Handbook 130 is a weights and measures regulation that is adopted by 32 states. And what you're looking at here is a list of the states that have fully adopted the standard in dark red, followed by others that have adopted rules very similar to it. So joining the MOM program and making those commitments to ensure chain of custody and handle your engine oils properly to ensure their quality will also satisfy those requirements for any weights and measures inspectors that happens to show up unannounced.
Jeff, where can people learn more about the new standards and even other work done by API?
Sure. Well, it all starts at our website, which is www.api.org. But there's a well-fast of information on there regarding the lubricants. If you do a quick Google search, for instance, on EOLCS directory, we'll pop right up there. That way, consumers can actually use that website to confirm if a product that they're seeing at a store is actually licensed. There's also plenty of information on there that explains the engine oil categories themselves, the licensing program, and we also are very proud of a pretty popular document called the Motor Oil Guide. That's been updated to reflect the new specifications. And this is a really good thing to have handy around the shop or to hand out to your customers. It's available only right now in print, so you'll find that downloadable. We haven't printed it yet, I should say, because of the current arrangements during this pandemic, but we will have those available. This document will really explain how the mark should be interpreted, and is very useful as an educational tool for your technicians and for your consumers if they're savvy enough to ask about it. And I'm happy to report that those are going to be available soon in some other languages as well, including Chinese, Spanish, and we just added Portuguese to the list. So there's plenty of information out there on our website where you can get your questions asked. And if not, just send me an email. I've got it up on the screen here. And if you've got any questions about our diesel exhaust fluid licensing program, which is very similar to the engine oil program, but for DEF, don't hesitate to ask. And then for questions about Motor Oil Matters, go to motoroilmatters.org.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for sharing all of this information about the new gasoline engine oil standards and what everyone in the aftermarket should be aware of. To our viewers, thank you for your time to learn more about these standards and to educate yourself and others to ensure that you're using the right motor oil for your customers. There is a lot of information in this webinar, so please feel free to watch it again or visit www.api.org to learn more. Jeff, thank you again, and viewers, we hope you have a productive rest of the day in your shop.
Thanks, Shannon, and I hope that this is really helpful to your listeners. We appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thanks again.